Okay, this is Aaron. He's my husband.
Before we keep going with the video, I just want to pause and take a second just to let you know that some of the topics that we discuss may be triggering for some people. We just really wanted to share our experiences and how we dealt with it, in the hopes that somebody can gain some value from them. Now, back to the video.
And today we're going to talk about what it's like to be with someone who has some mental health issues or mental illness. Basically what we're doing here is trying to remove the stigma from mental illness and mental health issues, so why not talk about it?
Yeah, I think that's important to talk about it, especially from like real world perspective, where it's not just like, here's how to take care of somebody with mental illness. It's just like, maybe we can actually talk more about kind of what goes into like our day-to-day, like kind of what to expect. When Jess first started kind of going through all of this journey,
like 9 years ago.
Yeah, I tried to Google it.
We were like BBs.
Yeah, I tried to Google it, and like if you try to like Google certain things like how to boil an egg into Google, it works great. But if you try to like Google like a full sentence with a specific scenario into Google, like it's pretty atrocious. Maybe we can just talk about it, and hopefully people can gain, like use it as like maybe a case study or something, and for their own lives, and hopefully it'll benefit them in some way.
We are not professionals. We are not in the psychology field at all.
Nope.
So this is not a diagnosis tool. This is just our experience and how we've coped and dealt with it all, and essentially real life. It's more information based.
Yeah, probably the first 7 years weren't really coping with it as much as just trying to survive. But that is the truth behind it, I guess.
This is just more of a real story of a couple going through it, and I wanted to bring Aaron into this because I think I noticed that he might have been struggling with it more in a way, just because it's me who's going through it all, who's diagnosed with this and this and this, but he has to deal with it as well every single day, and he lives with it. It's not in his head, but he lives with it every single day.
So for me, it was like a lot of trying to understand without being like pretentious about like, I understand. And
because
when
clearly he didn't.
Right? So it was balance between that, trying to understand while also like trying to not like just say like, why don't you just do this, like the logical way, because like
it's
a lot
not logical.
No, like a lot of it isn't logic, and like a
and
lot
you have to learn that.
Yeah, and it's not even learning that, it's just learning how to, like, it's like when you try to teach somebody like how to brush your teeth, this is like, hey, there's like, you just put your toothpaste on your toothbrush and you brush your teeth, but there's like something like 20 steps to like brushing your teeth that you've already missed, like turning on the water, wetting your toothbrush, rinsing and stuff like that.
You're like the best
so,
at
like,
brushing your teeth.
I'm terrible at brushing your teeth.
I like how you use that example.
Exactly, so I'm still terrible at being a husband. But slightly less terrible.
You're still a great husband.
Trying to learn how to unpack situations instead of just trying to automatically understand them. Just because,
that's huge.
Because the way you automatically understand things as a person without any like,
okay, so he has some.
I got my own issues.
His own issues, and like we can dive deep into that another time whenever you're comfortable with that. But
sure.
But like mine. It's not worse or anything, but it's like, how do we explain this? It's like, it's been diagnosed, and I'm like constantly still searching and still trying to find a new diagnosis for other things, and then getting diagnosed again, and then medication and all that. But I'm not saying Aaron's mental health problems or issues are less than mine, but he has gone through a lot of just trying to take care of me as well. It's kind of like if, you know, there was a physical issue, right? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you. How have you grown up with mental illness, or understanding it, or the stigma behind it?
Oh yeah, easy. Okay, so I have absolutely zero experience with zero experience with mental illness, zero experience with self-care, zero experience with like anything to do with like anything outside of like pursuing your career. Of everything else down. Deep down.
I grew up like that too.
Yeah. So
that wasn't helpful for us.
So we understood each other.
To be together.
Yeah.
In that sense.
So it was a lot of learning.
Well, like January 2020, before COVID hit, it was like a really big like thing in our lives, or in my life, that really changed everything for you.
Well, our life.
Our life.
Yeah.
But we weren't married then.
Still our life. We're living together.
I know, but like
I kind of liked you.
Mm.
So I kind of cared.
So like after January 2020, then the pandemic hit, then we were like together all the time and at home. So he had to kind of not grow up real quick, but had to learn everything in like a month.
Had to adapt.
Adapt a lot.
Had to adapt. So with like anything, like there's, yeah, like we did kind of say, like there's like a lot of things that kind of change, and you know, it's a kind of a humbling experience, I guess you could call it, that maybe you don't understand everything about how other people work and things like that. So it gives you like a chance to really learn, and you got to be really open to the fact that no matter how much you think you understand it, you might not understand it all.
It's kind of like it's okay, you know, just sit up, take a deep breath.
It's so hard to
You're
figure
gonna
out
be
what
okay.
to say to you like half the time.
I think that it's not just you though. Like I think every day people should be careful what they say. You can't just be like, yeah, I understand your pain, when you clearly don't, and it's like completely disconnected.
Well, I think like a lot of like people, some people have more like not significant stories, but more like more recent life-changing events, and they have like some people will have more perspective into like how other people feel than other individuals. A lot of like it's super common for people to just ask like, hey, like how's it going, and like not really expect to have to respond like in a certain way, like
I guess.
You know, so when somebody does respond like,
oh no, my life's pretty awful right now, I haven't left my room in like 36 hours and like life is just a mess.
This is like, what do you do with that answer? People just assume the worst, or like sometimes, you know, like you just you're not really equipped to answer like those sorts of questions, and it's not really because you're not trying hard enough sometimes. Maybe it's just because you haven't experienced something like that, right? So it's just like, hey, like my mom died, like I mean, like if you haven't had like a loved one die, like you obviously...
His mom is very much alive.
No, my mom's alive, yeah.
It's my mom.
Yeah, her mom. See, like I don't even know how to respond to this. Like her mom's dead is not the correct way to respond to that. But like if I haven't had like a lot of significant people in my own life pass, I probably would have been less help to her than I already wasn't.
I guess. It's kind of like telling someone who's very anxious to calm down or take a chill pill. Like that's not anything, and that's not something you should say, like, even though it's like normal to say. Like
logically, that's the least amount of steps that you would have to take to get to that end point. But you know, sometimes basically everything is more complicated than that. Like you can't just tell somebody to go from step 1 to step 12. Like you gotta help them along the way, you know? If
I didn't meet you, or like if we weren't together in university, I don't think I would have gone to a psychologist. Because do you remember how he didn't force me obviously, but he really encouraged and pushed me to see someone. I think that was a good push for me because I was in denial as well. Clearly, you know, even before, you know, my mom passed, like I was going through stuff before that. Like I was very anxious. I thought everyone was looking at me. I thought I was gonna get in trouble every single second from anyone, my boss, my parents, like a professor at school, I don't know, a janitor, I don't know. Or if there was a police car, I'd be like, oh my gosh, they're here for me, even though I'm just like studying.
Yeah.
It was kind of bad, and I would have panic attacks like, I don't know, 5 times a day sometimes.
It was bad.
It was really bad at the time, and like looking back, it's like, I don't have that anymore.
Yeah, and like I can't even say like me asking you to go to a psychologist or pushing you to go to a psychologist was like not in a selfish way. Like it was just getting like a lot for me as like somebody in the relationship to like also be like,
but yeah,
but
that's kind of why I wanted you to be in this video explaining like your side of it, because like we're also used to taking care of someone with a physical, you know, issue, or like they're sick with something physical, unfortunately, or something like that, and how to be by them and like support them. But when someone has like a mental issue or illness that comes up, people are like, ooh, I'm good. And like the fact that you're still here dealing with it.
Well, like I think that does like loop back to it. Like it's okay to like ask your like the person you're dating to like, hey, do you want to go speak to somebody about like some of the issues you're facing? Because you don't have to like feel like you have like the worst mental illness to even go see a psychologist. Like they can help you with like a lot of like other things in your life too, like just things that you maybe you can't deal with by yourself, or even question if you can deal with by yourself, right?
Even stress with school.
Yeah, even
Like,
stress with school.
I think this is like my own opinion. If like I know it's a little bit of a privileged opinion, but everyone should go to therapy or see someone for help when it comes to mental health issues.
Yeah, and like it sucks that there are not more like resources out there for that are accessible to everybody. It's important to not take it all on by yourself, right? Like if you think this is somebody who you actually want to stick it out with and everything.
Oh, you want to stick it out with me?
You're ruining the mood of the video. Anyways, if you think it's somebody who you want to like kind of stick it out with and who you want to put the effort in with, like it's worth it to ask them like to either go with you to see someone or how you can support them to go see somebody, because you know
you can't take it all on.
You can't take it all on, and you can even be honest with that person too, like, hey, like I'm not trying to say any of this is your fault, but I've been really trying my best and I feel like I'm not doing a good enough job, and I want to be able to help you more or help you better, and I think that if you're open to going to see somebody, I can help with that, or like I can contribute more to your life rather than just try and fail. You can be more strategic about it.
And then your mental health as the support person or friend will go downhill, and then your relationship just won't work. Aaron said he was kind of pushing me for somewhat selfish reasons, but
Yeah.
I think it was an okay selfish reason because he just couldn't handle it anymore and we wouldn't be together 10 years later.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, he's not a professional.
And like, I mean, like Jess was saying, like it's not even just for like people in relationships. I mean, like if you even have a friend
Yeah.
who just needs some help.
Let's talk briefly about January 2020. And so that was a very significant, awful part of our lives. And I don't really feel comfortable going too deep into it. But just before the pandemic and all of that happened, something happened to me in January related to mental illness. And Aaron was helping me and being my support. And it got a little too much, and I wanted to talk more about the experience of going to a kind of like a group, like a support group, but not for the person going through the mental illness, but for the actual, it's like a support group for the support people.
Yeah, it was
without talking too deep into it, but just like your experience and not, targeting anyone.
So it's called a caregiver support group.
Caregivers, that's the word.
So basically you show up, you give an update about your life, and it gives you a chance to like kind of rant off a little bit. And then the last like 15 minutes of the meeting was more so about giving you tools to kind of deal and like kind of help yourself a little bit. So for the first little bit, you kind of talk, and there's people there from all sorts of backgrounds and all sorts of points in their life, and they're the person that they're supporting are dealing with all different sorts of mental illness. And honestly, most of the hour session was spent kind of listening to like other people's stories. It's nice because it does give you a little bit of perspective. For me personally, it was hard because my peer support group the demographic for it was a little bit different. So while I did get to see like the perspective of a lot of other people dealing with different mental health issues of the person that they were supporting, a lot of the people who were the supporters, they weren't in the same demographic as I was. I was a lot younger than a lot of them were. A lot of them were there as support for their kids. I was the only one there who was looking for support, being a supporter for a spouse. So I think there's only ever one other person there in like maybe the 2 months that I was attending before COVID shut everything down.
Why do you think that is? Like, where it was more parents than like a spouse, do you think that's a stigma thing or just maybe a coincidence? Or
honestly, I think a lot of relationships kind of fall apart because of mental illness.
That's true, actually.
A lot of people do, like, it's easier to end a relationship when you're just a spouse versus when you're a parent, because you're more in it for like a permanent situation, right? Like, hopefully.
Just a spouse.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So,
no, that makes sense.
yeah, so it was kind of nice. Like, I broke down and cried like literally the second that it was my turn to speak, because like at that point, like, it had been so
I didn't
long.
know that.
Yeah, because literally at that point, like, I'd been dealing with it by myself for so long, and like I wasn't the first to speak, so like I was already like emotional from hearing like other people's like hard times dealing with like mental illness. So I was like, God, I'm not the only one dealing with this. And it was great because like, yeah, we honestly are young, and like at our time in society, like, this is only really starting to become an active like discussion topic.
Yeah.
So not a lot of people have actively dealt with it, especially at, like, obviously right now it's really important to have the focus around the people going through it, but that also means that there isn't a lot of discussion, care, and support for the folks that are caregivers,
Which is really sad, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's important to give us support too, but I mean, like,
no, it is. No, it actually
is,
and that's kind of why I wanted you to be on here. Is like, I think there should be more support.
Yeah.
For the person taking care of the person going through mental illness, because who's gonna help me or someone like me if they don't have proper support?
Yeah, and I think while a lot of relationships do fail because of mental illness, I've seen tons of relationships flourish just because people really stuck it out and really tried, and it was successful because of just that. And it is really hard when there isn't like a support system there, because, you know, it's really isolating, and it's really hard on your head when you're in this position, because obviously, like, I want to help, right? Like a lot of spouses do, but the ways you can help is like super limited, like
very limited,
and they feel even more limited than the actual impact of like the help is.
Sometimes not saying something is better.
Yeah, which
and then
absolutely
the person helping will be like, I'm not doing anything to help.
Mm-hmm.
But not saying something can be better sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like when you see like a good friend, a spouse, a loved one, when you see like somebody crying and you feel like helpless. Mm-hmm. But when you're like living in a relationship like this, you kind of have to go through that almost like, depending on like relationship, you go through it like all the time, right? So you're just sitting there and watching this person feel like totally broken and destroyed, and what are you doing? You're literally just sitting there and watching. You feel like a dick, first of all, and like when you try to help and you don't say the right thing, you feel even worse.
It gets worse too,
right? So it's just like, and I always say the wrong thing.
He always says the wrong thing. It's
Mm-hmm.
been so long.
Yeah.
The main thing is like, he's actually been there to support me. He has pushed me, I think, in the right direction looking back. I hate talking to people about my feelings. I like to keep it down. I try not to cry in front of people, which has kind of changed, I guess. And then pushing me to the route of, you know, seeing a psychiatrist, getting medication. He also helps me refill the medication, because I hate the idea that I'm taking medication, but then I know I need to take it. So he's been very supportive in that way.
Mm-hmm. And that is one of the things you can do as like a caregiver support person, is you can, like, instead of directly trying to fix the situations, you can also remove barriers for that person to take care of themselves, right? Like for me, I couldn't force her to take medicine. It wasn't my position to. So like at least I could. Well, like I could suggest to you, and I could ask you to take your medication, but
yeah,
that's the most. I couldn't like force it down your throat. I couldn't inject it into you. Like that's
not right.
That's not right. So the least I could do was just ask if I could refill your prescriptions for you, ask if I could put your medication in like a safe place where you would see it. Things like that, just to make things easier, so that, you know, she doesn't have to actively go look for a medication. Just things to make
things more automatic.
Make things more automatic, make things more normal. Normalized. Yeah, that's just one of the things you can kind of do.
Which has really helped, because like ever since Aaron has taken that over, I'm not like panicking like, oh, I have nothing left and then I have to talk or call the pharmacy. Even mm-hmm. just like typing in the number to the pharmacy makes me anxious and upset, because it's like, oh, I need actual medication to deal with my brain, and mm-hmm. that doesn't seem normal still in my head, which is not good. So then that stops me from getting it, and then that stops me from getting better.
Yeah, and like that's like pretty late stage things you can do to like developed stage things that you can do to help your person. Even like in earlier stages too, like if you wanted to help somebody like go to see a psychologist, you could offer them like rides. You could offer to like not bribe them, but like if they wanted to like hang out and grab coffee after, to like like unwind and stuff.
Talk it out. Maybe.
Talk it out, or even before, to like kind of, you know, like just de-stress a little bit, because it can be like a really stressful thing to get in there in the first place. Or even if you want to offer, like, make a game plan, like you can make it like really step by step. And honestly, the more you can kind of sit down and break everything apart in your mind, it really helps the situation, because it makes things clearer for where you might be able to help. Because if you look at the thing as a whole and you try to address the situation as a whole, it's never really either possible or even helpful.
It's very overwhelming.
It is overwhelming for
both parties.
Exactly, yeah, for both parties. So I think that's probably like the best tip I could ever give, is just kind of break it down and see like what steps are in between where you can either help, take away barriers, provide support. It's okay to not be okay.
Thank you.